months ago, and have you recorded it?
I need to ask for my mum's consent.
Yes. So, you're right with the recording?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Good. So, hi everyone. This is actually something we've been talking about for quite a while, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
We get together, we have conversations, and I suppose it's like building from those conversations with something like this, where we can almost just sort of have, ideally, those sort of conversations, but with other people present. So you, in a sense, can get a sense of the type of things that a minister and a priest and rabbi will talk about when you're not around. You know,
I go to Costa.
When we go to those great places like Costa Coffee, exactly, we sit there and we talk about stuff, and we've really enjoyed that.
It's really good because I'm going to be honest. Sometimes I go to some meetings, maybe staff meetings, and I think, do I really have that space? But when I meet you, it's good because what it helps us is that we have more things in common than the things that divide us. So you're Jewish, you're a rabbi, I'm a reverend, but we come together and we all want the same thing for the better. So it's great we have those conversations.
Yeah, well, and that's really happened just now with our project. Helping a group of asylum seekers who've been placed in a hotel in, down there in the National, where we've been able, because of our friendship, to immediately get together, bring members of our community together who are doing amazing work. We've got Paul. Is Paul here? Where's Paul? Paul, that's actually Sue. And we've been able to really do some great stuff and help people that really need help. So it's good.
And it's good that we can sit on a sofa together. I mean, I don't know, this looks like an audition for Gogglebox. Imagine that, like the Reverend and the Rabbi on Gogglebox. That'd be pretty cool.
I'm in this sort of weird situation where, like, I'm in a situation where I've got my members think I'm like contemporary, right? And I'm in another league. I can't even profess to watch a Gogglebox that I could actually be up with you on the.
You watched Doctor Who?
Doctor Who, I did. Jodie Whittaker, Northern.
Yeah.
Northern, from around here. Jodie Whittaker around here as well. So that was. I came. As I said, I came here. I came in the back door. There was a statue there, and I got really frightened because it looked like one of the weeping angels from. And I must say, this feels like it's the Edinburgh Festival. I don't know if you've got this sort of in a pub. I'm from Edinburgh, and it feels almost like we're in the Edinburgh Fringe here doing a gig. So
you clearly have a better time than me.
Yes, maybe. So should we introduce ourselves?
Yeah.
Even though you all know we are, but let's see how we introduce ourselves. That'd be quite funny, wouldn't it?
Check if anyone else is in.
Yeah, sure.
Anyone else is, just bring them in. Anyone who's there.
Come in. Atheist, so
we'll take them.
Yeah.
So go on.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm Rabbi Matt. I'm the synagogue lead. We clearly we got dressed this evening in the dark without any lights. So I'm Reverend Matt, and I'm the Methodist minister for Muswell Hill. But I've got 3 churches. So I've got Holly Park on Crouch Hill, Middle Lane, which is opposite Priory Park, and I've got Muswell Hill as well. So yeah, it's my 4th year, I think. It's my 4th year. It goes quick, but I'm loving it. And I was ordained in June.
Well, I love the story about actually how the previous minister to you, who was Mike Long, I think his name was, who I got to know. I remember when I came, it was Andrew Dart. Andy Dart.
Yeah.
It was Mike, and Mike was moved to Notting Hill about a month before the Grenfell town burned down. And he's literally the Methodist Church looking onto the tower. I went down to see him the day after the tower burned down. I would go down because I felt, it was quite incredible. It moved just to have that. And that church was becoming this hub of, everyone, extreme political people, whoever was there with all their ideas, plus people would like delivering stuff. So, and then you came and we have a great time together.
We do have a great time.
He was a Liverpool fan, so we'll forgive him that. You're all, we don't mind Man United.
But I have to say that even though I didn't work with Mike, I know him through Synod, and we got talking at conference, and he took my mobile number once at Methodist conference, and he said, I'm going to message you if Liverpool win the league. I thought, you ain't going to. And out of the blue, all of a sudden, he WhatsApped me and said, you'll never walk alone. And I've got to say, I'm getting fed up with that song. It's really hard as a reverend. If a family say, I want that at the funeral, I'm like, should we not? No. I don't say that because I try to be pastoral, man. But yeah,
there are moments when it just.
Oh, it's terrible. Yeah.
Well, when I was 40, actually, we had they gave me the synagogue gave me a present, and it was a signed Arsenal top because I'm an Arsenal fan, and the individual who gave it to me, who's a big Tottenham fan. I actually met Gary Mabbott today. I had a lovely chat with him at the armistice service today in Wood Green. He took it out of a Tottenham bag. I really worried what this would be. It was this Tottenham bag. It was like, what merchandise are you going to do? It was an Arsenal. He's Joe David here, are good friends. We spent many an hour watching Arsenal play. They even think it's because of me that Arsenal lose when we go there. Yeah, exactly. So I'm David Mason. I'm the rabbi at Muswell Synagogue in Tennessee, which was built in 65. 1965, has been there since then, but I was born and brought up in Edinburgh, did 2 degrees in London, at the London School of Economics, and then was a number of years in Israel, became a rabbi, was in Kingston for a few years, Kingston upon Thames.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cycle through there.
Yeah.
I am.
Oh, you cycled?
Yeah. Bad London.
Wow, damn it.
Yeah.
I need to get on the bike now. And then and up in Muswell Hill, which has been really great community. And it's just lovely to be in an area like Muswell Hill, and close to Arsenal, of course. But yeah, so actually it sort of leads on, wasn't it? Because we were going to sort of talk to each other about what do we like doing when we're not at the pulpit. You know, what are our sort of? You might have already gathered some of that already, but you know, what do we like doing when we're not? What are we doing that's not at the pulpit that we're happy to share?
Yeah, and it's recorded as well, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, I'm a big Manchester United fan for my sins. Not doing so well this year, and I won't tell you which side I'm on, the Solskjaer side, if I'm not. But yeah, big Manchester United fan. I like rugby league. Does anyone know what rugby league is? Yeah, it's the best sport. It's more working down to earth sport. You know, that it's created on the M62. Pulled away from rugby union. I like to belong to people that pull away from things like Methodists, where we pull away from the Church of England. Rugby league, pull away from rugby union. I like cooking. I like going to the musicals. You know my best musical? Oh. It's not Kinky Boots. I absolutely love the Book of Mormon. Yeah, anyone seen the Book of Mormon? Isn't it good? Yeah. I mean, I can't repeat it here because it's just so rude. But my claim to fame is actually in Harrogate. I've actually had a real Mormon sing to me on the street. Because he said to me, can I talk to you about Jesus? And it's always an opportunity to get rid of anybody like that. Is to say, well, I'm a reverend. Always works every time. And I actually said to them, yeah, I work for the church. And I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I absolutely love the Book of Mormon. And with that, he started singing to me, hello, my name is Elder Price. And he started singing. So that's my claim to fame. I've had a real Mormon sing to me. So I like going to musicals. I like quizzes. Record all the quizzes, the chase, eggheads, all that kind of stuff. Spending time with Helen, learning new things. It's like being me, really. Going out, having tattoos and stuff. Yeah.
We've got a nice tattoo. Yeah, definitely. The tattoos are. I know. It's brilliant to see that.
Yeah.
And I think it's important, isn't it, to have that sort of time when you're not. It's difficult not to be a reverend because you are the reverend. But almost it's trying to find that time when you're not.
Yeah.
When you are you, when you're Matt.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's the same with me. I mean, for me, actually taking my son to football is a big thing. It's just a sort of nice time. We've got 4 children. They're all beautiful. And and actually the lockdown has actually offered all sorts of stuff. I don't know if you find that with the lockdown, the last 18 months of sort of developing. By the way, does everyone hear online? Is everyone hearing? Great. Thank you, Sam.
Good.
So, not my best position here, looking down.
No.
So,
I've lost weight.
well, that's one of the things I've done actually over the last 18 months. I completely, 6 months. I completely changed my diet. So I looked at that and I went to the doctor, and the doctor was like, "Your age, you're just older than you really are. You know, you really need to." And there was at one point where I thought, you know what, being a rabbi is not a very healthy job. It should be a reverend. You get going and doing the pastoral visits that you do. You have another biscuit, Rabbi, another piece of cake. And Jewish people love eating. It's a big thing to eat, right? So you get cake. And I've had to disappoint so many of my members now over the last few months when I can't accept the biscuit. They think it's because I think it's not kosher, right? Because of the Jewish, and I sort of say that jokingly. They go, "Oh, Rabbi, you don't want to eat now," but it's from the kosher shop. And I'm like, no, I'm just looking after my health. And I remember the chief rabbi actually once, the last chief rabbi who sadly passed away, came to our house opposite you guys, and we had a motor. We had like a sort of a police bike going down the road, accompanying us slowly down. And we got there, and he had a really specific diet because he would eat so much out in different places. You have to be careful. So the other thing I also done a lot of is feeding garden birds. It's become a big thing of mine in the last 18 months. I don't know why, it just gives me that sense of release. We have a small garden, but we brought in so many birds into the garden through placing and through buying different suet bowls and suet cakes. And it was just like, it's sort of something to me. And actually it meant that I quite like working at home. Even though I've got a lot, we're doing a building work in our community, and there's an office going to be put there. So I need to get into that office. But it's part of it. I've really enjoyed being at home, working, and then being able to look and see the birds coming to the garden, a bit of nature. So yeah, it's good to have that.
That's really good.
Yeah.
I can certainly relate to when you say about pastoral visits. I mean, when I visit a Caribbean member, I feel like I've got away with it. I've done my home communion. I'm about to leave, and they'll say, "I'll put the kettle on," and this massive like Caribbean cake comes out, and like have 2 slices, and it's always the day before weighing. The serving world, so it's kind of like it's a good thing because you're feeding from another member, but they put the weight on, and it's like you have lost weight. I've lost nearly 2 stone. So
that's good. That's really good.
Yeah, you couldn't see my dog collar before with the chins. But
I know, and you also feel like as a minister that you need to look after yourself, don't you? Because we are there for people, and there's an expectation of people who are worshippers or members of the rabbi or the priest or reverend are there for them. And sometimes we need to look after our own soul, don't we?
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's why we're here with loads of people, and
you can bounce from each other as well. On the WhatsApp, one of my churches, I won't name, but one of my WhatsApps, they always say, "Oh, this local preacher was really good." I mean, I've got a couple of local preachers here today, Brian and Helen, and they're the lay preachers who go out, and members will always say, "Oh, wasn't so good today? Wasn't Brian so good?" And WhatsApp it. And last week we had a preacher called John Sims, and he was really good. And John came up to me afterwards and he said, "Do they always clap you after the sermon?" They never clap me. They never clap me. I'm the reverend. I'm the one closer to God, obviously. But they never like. It is quite a thing, isn't it? Because you need each other. You want to give, because we're giving so much of our time, aren't we? So
we have a joke about that actually, because on the Yom Kippur, right, it's the holiest day of the year for Jewish people, and the night is really, really holy. And this guy goes up to a rabbi and says, "Look, it's Tottenham Arsenal on that night. What do I do? What am I going to do? It's Tottenham versus Arsenal." So the rabbi says to him, "Well, you can record it." He says to him, "What, really? I didn't know you could record the rabbi sermon." So you can see it entering in. I mean, we actually have a sign. We have basically a board that tells you the portion of the week every week. And there's one for our downstairs and one for the ladies' area as well. And there is actually a sign, one of the slots that says "no sermon," which has been up there for quite a long time, I must say. And I'm one of those times, so we have a bit of a joke about that. In fact, it's Phil's wife that actually got the commission or brought in that, and we enjoy the idea that it will say "no sermon" on my thing. We'll report that back to Helen.
I've got to say that, while you're on that, it was really comforting, because the last time we had your civic service in the synagogue, there were members sitting near each other going, "How long's the rabbi going to go on for? I reckon he's going to go on for 10 minutes. I reckon he's going to go on for 15 minutes. And I was just sat there thinking, I'm so glad it's not just me that has that problem.
One day I'm worried one day I'm going to find out that there's like a sweepstake.
Yeah.
How long my sermon is.
Yeah.
There you are, I found it.
What's the time? Well, it's really good, because they were going like, "Oh, he said this before, he's always said this before." And I'm thinking, God, it's not just me. It's not just the church that problem.
So what's next?
Yeah, what's next? So what about like outside the pulpit? And then you've got your individual, and also you've got your social side of your tradition. How do you balance that? And is there one that's more important than the other?
Yeah, this is something that we, Matt and I, both talked about a lot, which is a big thing today, that, you know, we are living probably more in a I type of society. I read a book, actually an audio book recently by an American called Robert Putnam. They wrote The Upswing. He wrote a book called The Upswing, where he talks about this sort of swing that goes from a more I type of world in America in the late 1800s, early 1900s, all the way up to the sort of after the war, what they call the post-war consensus settlement, where it was much more. And then all down now to where we are, where things are more unequal, more about I. And I think, you know, we have a lot to say about that in Judaism. We talk, there's a famous story in Midrash, which is a Jewish text, sort of homiletic text about the Torah, which a rabbi, famous rabbi, talks about a story of a boat where you've got people on the boat and one individual is boring a hole underneath their seat. What you do it right under. This is the ultimate, you know, anti-vaxxer here. You know, he's boring a hole under his seat. He doesn't care what's going on anywhere else. He's going to do what he wants where he is. And everyone else says to him, "Well, you're bringing us down." And he says, "But I can do what I want underneath my seat." Right? This is the first libertarians. You know, I'm doing what I want underneath my seat. And of course, this story is meant to show the sense of guarantorship, that we're all responsible for each other. So I think I would say that we cannot escape in Judaism the linkage there is between people. Even although we do still say everyone is meant to say the world was created for me. In Hebrew, Bishvili Nivra Ha'olam. Everyone's meant to say the world was created for me. Not an ego trip, but that everyone has dignity. There's every individual has the breath of God in, and therefore has dignity as they are. But at the same time, we cannot escape that linkage that we have. And we saw that in COVID and the pandemic, everyone working together. And that's why I loved, you know, so that, you know, I'm the sort of, I should have said, I'm like the closet Methodist, you know, the loved when I was in the north, in the Pennines, the North Pennines, when there were churches all over the place that were Wesleyan churches. And I remember going to Killop Mine, where Wesley had preached to the miners and the working classes. It was quite romantic, I felt.
Yeah.
And you talked about this idea of the holiness of the social
holiness. Yeah, I'll have to give you a membership card, David. I'll present you with a membership card. Rabbi David Mason to kill a I think what I like about Methodism is the social holiness. So John Wesley, you can tell now I'm going into my Methodist thing, I get really passionate about it.
That's the way.
But John Wesley said about there's no holiness without social holiness. So yeah, you've got your individual, but you've got your holiness side of things, which I like to do. I like to pray every morning. I like to read some scripture. But Wesley says, actually, you need social holiness, that you need to be with people. The social holiness really important. For Wesley believed that actually deep down was as a socialist, going out. The last thing he did when he was old enough, he would go out to preach when he was really old, and he'd get enough money so he could afford bread and for the family down the road. So social holiness is really important. We need each other. We're social beings. I have to say, the first few months, I thought it was great at the beginning of lockdown. The thought of not having to go to church on a Sunday was brilliant.
The same on
you were
Saturday.
Same on Saturday. And then
you know, my dog.
And to be recorded like this, where a clerical shirt on the top half, but I could have pajamas on underneath.
At least pajamas.
Shorts, yeah.
At least you have pajamas.
Yeah, well, yeah. And it was really, you know, like good. But then afterwards, you think, no, we're called to be social beings. And the sad thing about that is that going to church or going, I'm sure for you, David, for going to the synagogue, people have got out the habit of doing something, and we need each other. We need to be bouncing from each other. We need that social holiness. And so much that famous there's a quote by a former Labour MP who said that the Labour Party owes more to Methodism than it does to Marxism. That social holiness is really important. And it's also interesting how people say to me, I want the Methodist Church to be how it was always been. And you say, well, okay, we're going to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. we're going to pray, because Wesley always used to pray. He said, I've got so much to do that I need to pray about it. So he puts me to shame. We're going to get on our horses. We're going to travel hundreds of miles. We're going to preach the gospel outside. We're going to do this. We're going to give to the needy. We'll probably read our Bible a bit more, because that's what social holiness is, gathered around a circle. And then we'll pray again at the end. Go to bed, get up at 4. Is that what you mean by being a Methodist? No.
Okay.
Oh, no. They mean, I want to go back to what I know as Methodists. I want to go back to what I feel comfortable in the 60s or the 70s or the 80s. And that always puts people to, so that's social holiness.
It's funny, actually, because when I was a kid, I'm sure many other people, remember this. I remember as a kid, I'd be sitting with my dad in synagogue, and I'd always want to go and talk with my friends. I'd always want to go over the other side and talk to my friends. And my dad was very much synagogue now, and I'd say, but and we called the synagogue in Hebrew a Beit Knesset, a house of gathering, right? And you're gathering to talk, right? Of course, the idea is you gather to pray, but there was also that sense of gathering. So my synagogue, I'm sure you've been to the civic service, it's not a quiet place. Is it, friends? And at the same time, we really miss that sense of people who've gone out of the habit. It's masks. It's a bit cold now because we ventilate well. It's not the same, and we desperately want to get back to the same. And actually, we quite miss it. That sense of just everyone in, sitting together with people you know. I mean, David's a really good example there. I know him. I'll see him on my left in synagogue. Very quiet, David, doesn't
So,
but we had members of the synagogue from older generation who will get on. I know, with David is a good example of generations getting on with each other. How that is so beautiful to see in the context of the synagogue. So the Beit Knesset. I would always joke about that, but it was about being with other people. Do you think sometimes that we can lose the individual in the social? Is that or is that something that's balanced out?
I think it's getting that balance, isn't it? This last 20 months, we've realised we've needed each other. We've really needed. These have been difficult times. I mean, I'm looking around here, there's people with really difficult and challenging jobs. And it's not easy, is it, for you, a rabbi, being a reverend, looking after people. So I think this last 20 months, we've realised that we've needed more people. That the things that we've really enjoyed, maybe we've took for granted over, family and friends. But also we need that individual side. It's getting that fine balance. Sometimes we can be so busy being and doing things, and just so that we forget that individual time. So I think we've got to get that balance right, don't we? But I forgive a lot of my members if they said, I'm missing Sunday because I want to go out and enjoy myself. I'd say, go out, enjoy yourself, because we've missed out on so much.
I think that's really important, actually, because I think part of being a faith leader, and I think we both share that, is understanding where people are. So, I will have people that will, one member of my synagogue will say, I have 2 temples. One is the synagogue and one is the Emirates Stadium. There you go, right?
You do a lot of praying there. Sorry.
I have a good friend Phil at the back who will love that one.
It's all right, we're doing the same at Old Trafford. It's fine.
So that's brilliant. Well, there's the famous story about the last chief rabbi, Rabbi Sachs, who went to, there was a 6-2 victory by Man United about 91, famous 6-2. Man United won, and Archbishop of Canterbury, who was George Carey, was about to become Archbishop, was at the game with Rabbi Sachs, who was about to become chief rabbi. And they both went, they're both Arsenal fans. So the next day, someone wrote in the Times how it clearly proves there's no God. But the next day, you have to look this up, it's a 2-line letter that Rabbi Sachs wrote saying it doesn't prove there's no God, it just possibly means he's a Man United fan. It's just this lovely sort of,
Well, that's the way, maybe go to the Emirates together, maybe not when it's Man U, But maybe we could actually watch the football together.
Love to, actually love it. A bit of interfaith
Yeah.
football watch, that'd be lovely.
Yeah.
You know, you heard it here.
You won't convert me.
No, we're not talking about conversion.
No.
So now, I mean, you talked about challenges before, and that's one of the things we often talk about is challenges that come up. Because what I was saying before was that when you know where your members are, your worshippers are, it's also understanding what their challenges are, what their thinking is. And there will always be differences. There will often be differences between the leader, the faith leader, and I suppose his or her, or sometimes flock. And that is quite difficult and complicated. And it's about sort of moving through that in a way that keeps the relationship, that democratic sort of relationship with our worshippers. So we were talking about what challenges, and that'd be interesting to sort of touch on that for a few. What challenges that we face? What's a challenge that we come up with that we're willing to go into?
I was going to say, but I thought better not because I don't want my members to get upset. I was going to say the challenges, members. No, I'm not joking. I think for me, being a Methodist is a joy, and so it's a difficult time to be newly ordained. I was meant to be ordained last year, and I think for the Methodist Church, we're going through some challenging ways at the moment. We're trying to, as what we are for Methodists, we believe in the means of grace, that all are welcome. And the difficulty is that I feel for being a minister is trying to get people back to church who have been comfortable, reaching out to those who are also housebound, because you've seen them for the last 20 months who were quite active in the church have gone drastically down. You can tell that they've certainly shown their age, and that's been difficult. Trying to hold all of this together, and even then new people coming into church, which is wonderful. And then the Methodist Church conference this year had a small approval for conference. It's just a small thing for the circuit about marriage and relationships. And, despite where I am on my view, you're then trying to hold different people's opinions. Interestingly, I won't name who, but a minister somewhere in London, so London's a big area, has lost 2 members because of the marriage and relationship report, because one felt it's gone too far, and the other one who's left is it didn't go far enough. And you're thinking, as a minister, what are you meant to do with that? And wrestling with all of this, which I think then is where we're going as a society, isn't it? The law of the land, society. And then how can we then, as a church, be more inclusive? How can we be more welcoming for those who are maybe different to how we think and how we are, for the LGBTQ and all people in our community? How can we be a place of welcome and acceptance? And I think it's not about me, it's about what I am. And if people say, why are we debating this, Reverend? I say, because we're Methodists. All are welcome. The means of grace.
You've got a synagogue now. You've become the rabbi of my synagogue just already. That's it.
I don't mind, but it'd have to be maybe every 4th of the month, because I've got Holly Park, Middle Lane, Muswell Hill, then it'd have to be the synagogue after that. I mean, how about you, David? I mean, I know I've gone on a bit there, but it's hard, isn't it, to try and wrestle with, you try to be, you've got people who are quite conservative on their theology side of things, and liberal.
I think for me, I mean, for me, in my community, it will often be the fact that there is a dissonance between how people live their life outside and how they live it in the community. So, for instance, the role of women in the community. So we are an Orthodox synagogue that will run by Jewish law. We probably would consider ourselves more modern in the dispensing of law than communities you would find, let's say, at Stamford Hill or even Golders Green. But still, I'm part of a family of synagogues. We call it the United Synagogue. And therefore, we're under the chief rabbi. And so there's a sense of wanting to keep within the law. Well, that's because I'm also religious, so I want that. But at the same time, I also have to respect and recognize that distance. That if a woman comes in and is sitting separate or doesn't do the same functionally as a man does in the synagogue, that just looks a bit mad in terms of how society's developed. so I think the baseline, I remember coming to the synagogue, and so we have in our synagogue a downstairs area for men and a gallery for women, which is often the case in sort of traditional Orthodox synagogues in London. I remember women were saying to me, Rabbi, you're really amazing, you're great. I'm like, oh, thank you. I was all right. Well, because you look up at us. I was like, wow, okay. As if like you would not want to, and you would therefore be cutting out half of those who come in to pray. So I think that's the starting point, is I've got to work with the fact that everyone who comes in wants to be part of the community pray. And that will go also for LGBT. We've set up an inclusion group which looks at that. We have a statement now on our website. Because it's, law of the land, it's just simple compassion. Our religion has to generate compassion, has to look and be clearly compassionate. And if people who are gay, people who identify as LGBT, feel they cannot access the community, there's something wrong. There will be a limit, so there'll be an understanding in Orthodox community to have a same-sex marriage or service will be difficult. But we've also talked to people in the community who are, gay, and worked with them to make it work as a community. So it's really difficult, But I think it's just respecting where people are.
And you find also it's where we are in our differences, there is unity. We need to be together. Different faiths coming together. I mean, when I hear people in my churches, I don't mind having a different opinion to me, but I will stop you if you're homophobic.
Yeah.
I will stop you. And lots of things to me would say, why would I come to church? Because actually I see more love down the pub in a coffee shop than I do in a church.
Yeah,
I can't argue with that.
No, and people will put me right, because in the sense, the difference almost in the dynamic is you're talking to someone with a liberal perspective more, if that's in some way, with worshippers who might be more conservative. Whereas I'm probably, because I'm coming from a religious perspective, I was brought up in Edinburgh, I wasn't religious all my life, a community which is liberal thinking. And so they'll put me right. I think I once gave a sermon once where I started talking about, kids coming home with different colours, blue and pink and all the, they were like booing me in the gallery. I was like, that's it, Rabbi, that's it. Yeah, not booing. It was the people that I knew that I had a good relationship with. I was like, can I say that? I sort of had that little, they were, no, Rabbi, okay, so there's that sort of banter back and forwards where, I suppose, and I've found, we have a Jewish organization called Keshet, which is Rainbow, which works on LGBT inclusion. And I found it really helpful just to get members of that community in and talk and learn. I'm learning that for people who are gay, it's an identity. And many people in the religion won't think of that. I think of it as a pathology. And actually, I learned it was an identity, how people identify. And so then that's quite clear, important, I want to relate to that. So, yeah.
I think it's also important that we don't, in our places of worship, we don't expect people to think and be the same like what we all are. That actually, in our differences, there are unity. I use my mum as an example. Who's coming to stay with us in a few weeks. So I've got to get the house ready. But my mum is one side, and the other side. We'll never agree on anything. My mum says she's always right. We'll never agree. But we never finish off the conversation by saying, I love you, good night, or whatever. We always finish as, my mum's there, I'm over here. And I think that's what we've got to be. Sometimes we expect people to think the same as me. Well,
and that's a really good point, actually, because it'd be interesting to ask, in your tradition, in Methodist tradition, is there a teaching, or where do you learn personally about how to deal with difference, with radical difference?
I think always a good thing is it always to turn to the Gospels for us is a good thing. We look at Jesus, where he, in our tradition, we're always welcoming the people who are different to him. And let's be honest, what we read in our churches, if Jesus wanted an easier life, he'd call people who were like him, because Jesus was a Jew. He was teacher, rabbi, and so, but he calls fishermen. The first lady who proclaimed that Jesus was alive was was a woman. So that's the first thing that we always look at. And then looking at Wesley's teachings and our hymns, we like to sing our hymns. One of my favourites is "Oh, for 1,000 Tongues." It's always a good one to have with a beer in your hand. And I remember once sitting in Harrogate, somebody came up to me and said, "Matt, I don't know if I quite like the line, 'the humble poor believe.'" And I'm thinking, oh my days, what's he going on here? You know, Wesley wrote that the humble poor believe is because it's for them. All are truly welcome. Wesley's last letter. Have you been to the museum actually? Wesley's chapel.
Yes, I have. That is in Middle
Old Street.
Or what? Where is it? Oh, down in London.
Yeah, London.
No,
yeah.
I haven't been there. There was a Wesley church in the Pennines. Where was this central church in the Weir there? Weir. I can't remember where it was. There was somewhere where there was actually he had preached there.
Yeah, that area is big. Yeah.
No, but I'm big also.
Yeah. We'll go together. We'll get a discount together. We'll get a date.
Go for a beer.
Yeah, I was going to say coffee.
Oh.
Yeah. But in there together is one of Wesley's last ever letters to William Wilberforce. And he's encouraging Wilberforce to keep going against slavery. So there's lots of things that we can look at in our Methodist tradition. Wesley's teachings, hymns, scripture, being around each other. We can learn so much from it.
But, in Judaism, there's a famous joke about how if a Jew was washed up on a desert island, what would he want? And he would want there to be 2 synagogues. Because you'd have the one you go to and the one you don't go to.
Yeah.
So the Jews do like to argue.
Yeah.
And actually, there's a Yiddish term, isn't there? A broigus. We talk about a broigus. Actually, the chief rabbi came up to Glasgow to COP, and I was there actually in COP. He spoke at a synagogue in Glasgow, Gifford in Glasgow. And there's a Scottish Yiddish word called a Faribault. A Faribault is like a sort of very, very like sort of quick up and down argument, really fearsome, but it comes down. Broigus goes over time. But there's sort of like graphs about this. But there is a statement in Jewish text going back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah is like codified Jewish ideas from about 2,000 years ago. And this statement says any argument that is for the sake of heaven will never end. Its end is to be sustained. Technically, it will never end. So I suppose there's something inbuilt in Judaism. There's an idea that when God separated in the Bible between the higher and the lower waters in the creation story, that from there argument came into the world. Right, but not of a negative sort. The sense that actually to argue is good. It's the stuff of humanity. And I'm very much into that. We often will talk, and Matt will go, we talk about what's common. And I'm like, no, I want to talk about what's different. I don't want the common, because actually the common's the easy bit. It's the different, but difference is the stuff of life. Because, I'm of a Jewish tradition, you're of a Methodist. A world in which we can live with different traditions and everyone maintains that place, I think it's a pretty good world. And that's probably even a world that will lead to something in the future. Messianic. Well, we all have views of how that will happen, and let's wait till it happens, and then we'll see who's right, I suppose.
Don't you think it'd be a lot easier if actually we could go back and say, it was all right? Then everything would be hunky-dory, wouldn't it? Because it's quite good up there. You want to, that's not what faith is it?
No. I think there has been suffering brought on, and you live today. You think about the non-resolution of COP in a way just now, and created by the differences that exist and national differences. We know what happened. We know in the last century. But at the same time, identity, I think, has the potential to really drive togetherness. And we need to bring, identities together to build the world.
When you say about COP26, just looking around, it's amazing to look around that all of our audience are still awake. It's really good.
They got the COP.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I mean, there was one more thing we had, but we could come back to it. But I wonder if anyone's got questions, because it's 8:45. Would you like to ask? It's 8:45.
Oh, wow.
So come on, Paul. Was that Paul?
My question was, what brought each of you to be a rabbi and a minister?
Yeah, right.
Jewish
yeah.
Finn wouldn't have me, so.
Yeah, the Methodists would, they'd shut me out.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, for me, I became more religious. I wasn't brought up religious when I was a kid. So you don't drive in an Orthodox, in a religious community, you don't drive on the Sabbath. We have a lot of our members that live locally in Edinburgh. We lived a 15-minute drive. So we would drive to the synagogue. We'd go to the synagogue, but we'd drive. And I always say that, and I've told our synagogue this a number of times, that there was one religious family. And if you would see them on the way, my dad would tell us to duck. And it would be like Kit in, Knight Rider. Remember there was a driverless car? Anyone looking with it, there's no one driving. Because it was such embarrassment, right? And that was how I was brought up, this sort of like traditional, Jewish is good, but I wasn't brought up in a way that was observant. That was how we were. And I became more. But actually, there was something about me becoming more observant in a sort of, but an organic way, I mean, the word normal probably doesn't describe it well enough, but throw that out there, in a way that doesn't take me away from the world. So I always wanted, the idea that I would go on Saturday to football after the synagogue. You often have Jews, I always say, and this is not true, that Jewish people will either have gone to a position where they only go to football and not the synagogue, or only to the synagogue and not the football, because they'll become so religious that they don't want the football anymore. And there's that sort of ground where you can still be grounded in life and in music and television and society, and still develop. And maybe there was something about me that wanted to give that over in a model to others and push me into more educational and rabbinic. And probably that's something I hope that I've, the last 16, 17, 18 years, I've been able to do as a rabbi. Say you can be religious, but also be of the world. And that drove me there.
Yeah.
Mad?
Yeah, no. I mean, for me, I was christened in the Church of England, which still obsessed my mum, that Methodist minister. And I went to the Methodist church because my dad was a Methodist. He was the Boys Brigade captain. So I was like my dad, because my granddad passed away this year. He was a Boys Brigade captain. My dad was a Boys Brigade captain. I was going to be a Boys Brigade captain, and so forth. So I've always gone in, and I was in the Boys Brigade. And reminds me of Sir Alex Ferguson, who was in the Boys Brigade in Scotland. He said if it wasn't for the Boys Brigade, when he was the manager of Manchester United at the time, I said, come back, all that's forgiven. And when he was the manager of Manchester United, he said if it wasn't for the Boys Brigade, he wouldn't be doing what he's doing today. And I have to say, for the Boys Brigade, if it wasn't for the Boys Brigade, I wouldn't be here today doing what I'm doing, because it was that teaching, what we were given to us by the Boys Brigade officers of Christian manliness. Then I became a Christian at 17, because I was a bit of a naughty boy at church. Do you find that to believe? Oh yeah, yeah. No. I used to get out of the car and the Sunday school teachers were locking the door, because I just used to go around and mess about and play with my friends, play football afterwards. And there was always a big dome at the top, and you would echo thinking this is boring, how long is it? And it would hit, and people at the back would hear you. And I was always getting told off on the old ears at the back because they could hear what I was saying, whispering, which is boring. And then my grandparents, they died, my mum's parents, when I was 17, in a space of 4 months. And interestingly, that I remember praying for the first time, and it got me closer to my faith. And my sister was more of a Christian. My sister's now an atheist, but probably say that even though she's an atheist, demonstrates better being a Christian than some people who go to church. But that's for a discussion at the time. And then I became a member of the Methodist Church. I trained to be a local preacher. I was a lay worker, children and families worker in Harrogate. I candidated for the ministry. I was accepted the first time, trained, and if you like, the rest is history. But a hard journey. And when Wesley said my heart was strangely warmed, and actually I had that experience where I felt comfort that life after death, and so much that me and John Wesley, we share the same birthday.
Whoa. It's meant to be.
Yeah, and I also share the same birthday as Henry VIII, but I'm only on Helen at the moment, so but she's only a divorce.
This is Helen.
So that's
This is Helen Never.
yeah. So this is a really like a journey. I haven't. One of my things is that sometimes you get ministers who go to college, go to university, go into the. They don't know what the real world is. Sometimes, and you can tell. So sometimes
We've both been on a journey. Really.
Yeah, we have. Yeah,
sort of sense of being on, and life is a journey.
Yeah, unemployment along the way. 13 weeks unemployment, remembering queuing for my benefits. You know, it was one of the lowest parts of my life. My dad said to me, I remember once, your first 4 weeks it'll feel like a holiday, and after that you'll feel so depressed. And it was so true. So I'm somebody who's not, like both of us, it seems like that, not just gone to university, come out and gone, right, I'm going to change the world, look at me. I want to walk alongside people. And when there's hatred or when there's really hurt, I want to walk alongside you because I know what you can feel like.
We are in a bubble often, aren't we? We don't get to see the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, good question.
You unlocked some good stuff there.
Yeah.
So anyone else, please do ask.
We've got 2 questions from here.
Together, so it's great to be here today. See you, bro. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Beth, we've just got one more question here at the moment, then we'll come to you. Because there's
Sorry.
some questions online as well.
Yeah.
But please.
You started off by saying that the connection between you was the similarities are closer than the differences between you. I just wondered, does that mean that whatever differences there might be, are they consequential, or are all the differences inconsequential?
Whoa. By the way, that was Matt that said that bit, not me. You know.
I think it was you that said that.
Are they? Yeah, I mean, so in 2014, you know, in the middle of the Gaza war, I had got a group of ministers from different churches together that I've got to know, from our URC friend, Baptist church. I mean, Mike was there at the time, Quakers, and we met. Phil was there actually.
Yeah.
Phil was there. He was at the back there, and we just talked about what the issues were with. You know, we wanted just to have an open conversation about difficulties we might have with the situation, hearing others, and just talking about it. And I think that, given that complicated situation, seriously complicated, which we obviously don't want to go into now, there are differences that will come up between Methodism and a focus on the social and social justice, right, and the rights of people. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't think of the rights of people, but at the moment in Israel, its relation with the Palestinians, it's not simple in terms of rights. It's an unideal situation, at least. Yet at the same time, for Jewish people in my community, you know, and across the land, Israel is very important. And that has brought, you know, I used to talk a lot to Mike about it actually. And that has, there's differences. There is a consequential difference between an identity element within the Jewish community, something that's important for Jewish identity, and a way that I see within Methodism, which is the focus on the social justice part of the J-pits, right? The Jewish policy, which and I'm in that position, which is the weird one, where I sort of love that social. I mean, you know, my members will know social justice is important for me, and so almost I want to bridge that. But there is a consequential area which needs serious work, you know, at higher levels even as well. When you know, like a motion will come to Methodist conference and will be different and difficult, then it will, you know, affect relations, and we need to work on that. You know, and I would love to be part. I always say I want to be part of working on it. That we understand where we're coming from.
And I think also difference is how we worship and what we read, our holy scriptures. And I remember when we had ministerial training, college will be really proud. I remember stuff. It's coming out now. We had a Jewish weekend, and we had Rabbi
Jeff.
Young.
You have fish balls.
No. Yeah, no. I remember
The
once.
Jewish weekend has to involve chopped liver and fish
Right,
balls.
because they wouldn't have. We'd give them a card to change the lights, and they wouldn't have one because everything had to be done before it was the Sabbath. And anyway, we said to my friend who was travelling late, and we'll save you some food. It was salad. And he said to me, he got to the canteen really late, said, Matt, thank you so much for those meatballs. They were delicious. And I'm thinking, I ain't kept you any meatballs. Oh, there was in the slow cooker. And I'm like, you've just eaten the rabbi's meatballs. That was actually cooking over the Jewish thing. And I remember the Jewish weekend where so we had a Jewish weekend where it helped us the differences to see things. And Rabbi Young was showing us about scripture, which I thought I knew about the Old Testament of Hebrew teaching, and then would completely mess my head up, because then I'd be like, oh, what I'm reading in my Old Testament is different to what the Torah is, and that completely, like, for some people, really messed their heads. But the best weekend I had was the Interfaith Week, where you could see the difference of the vicars and the ministers, those who were the pluralists, I was like right over here, and those who actually Christianity is only right for me. And I was loving it. Going to the mosque, going to the synagogue, going to the temple, getting so much out of it. And the ones who didn't feel comfortable were that end, who were saying, well, our Bible says this, and I'm thinking, does it really matter? We've been actually, yeah, there's differences, but we can learn from each other, going around the different places of worship, listening to people's stories. Yeah, there's difference to what we believe, but actually what we need is things like this. Because it's things like this that the media are not reporting. It's things like this that they're not reporting because people say it's religion that causes wars. Maybe we can't deny that. But actually, it's about relationship.
Yeah.
And we need to be telling people.
I think when religion couples with power is a problem. When religion and power get together, that's dangerous. But if religion can manage power in a way that doesn't, then that exactly. Yeah, and I think being curious is a different, isn't it? I think I often talk about it, being curious of the other. And you're curious about others and how they do faith, because they're all doing faith. Right, there's some questions online, Beth. I think you are there questions online? Can we have anyone on the line who wants to ask a question?
Yeah, we've got Gillian. She wants to know, Matt, how do you manage 3 congregations?
So that's Gillian from Israel, actually.
Oh,
Gillian,
wow.
Can we see you, Gillian? You have to unmute yourself and see your video. That's it. There's Gillian. You can also see Gillian up there.
Fantastic.
There's Gillian there.
Yeah. Hi, Gillian. How do I manage 3 churches? The simple answer is drink lots of coffee. It's really difficult. So I like to be a minister that reminds my colleagues that I've got 3, 1 more than some, 2 more than 1. But actually, how I do it is every first Sunday of the month, I go to Holly Park, which is one of my churches. Second Sunday of the month, I go to my other church. Third, I go to Muswell Hill. And that's how I try to even it out.
I should try that with mine. First Sunday I'll go to my synagogue.
Yeah.
And then I'll find somewhere else.
Yeah, that'd be good.
I'm somewhere else, everyone.
That'd be good. It is quite hard to do.
It's really hard.
I do feel like we need to get more Methodist ministers through the system. And maybe, sadly, we probably need to close more churches. Otherwise, it's not going to get any easier. We might end up having 6. I might end up having 6 churches in Cornwall, or 10. So yeah, it's quite hard to manage that, Gillian. Monday, 1 church I do try and give them time. Tuesday, Wednesday, and another one. And I still get church members that go, we don't see enough of you. And you're like, I'm doing my best. Very difficult. So that, I hope that's helped, Gillian, how I do operate 3 churches.
What sort of size are your congregations?
Is that Amalia asking?
Yes. I wonder how big his congregations are.
So how big are the congregations?
Holly Park, they don't like it when I say that Holly Park are the smaller one because they're a membership of 35, but they have 18. So actually that's quite healthy, isn't it? Because you look at 18 to 20 people there, 15 missing. Middle Lane's a membership of 65. We had about 25 today, so I'm counting, thinking, where's the other 40? Probably been too comfortable. And then Muswell Hill's a membership of around about 100, 100-ish. But I think the term membership, it's old hat. It needs looking at. You know, it's like you've got to earn to be a member. And also, regards to membership, I feel like that should not be the success. The success should be how many people we're reaching out to. Who's the contacts that we've got outside the church? Because if we focus within, then we go back to being in that bubble.
That's great. We'll go back to anyone in the pub, in the audience who would like to ask. Please do. They're thinking here. Or online. Anyone else online?
Well, Amalia wants to know that, did you come from a Methodist background?
Yes, I mean, I think you answered.
No, I didn't,
that question.
Amalia.
I think you answered that question. I think you said you were in the
yeah.
Church of England at first.
Yeah, my dad was a Methodist, my mum was a Church of England.
Well, actually, it's funny because the only connection I could make is the fact that my dad was from Bristol.
Oh, big, yeah.
And there was a Methodist community there, and I think their MP was an individual called Anthony Wedgwood Benn. And I think he was one of the people that said this. One of the people that attributed to him is the statement about Methodism and Marxism. In his less Marxist days, I suppose.
Yeah.
His earlier days. But I don't know. So anyone else?
Julian's got a question. Do you Zoom your service?
Do you what? Say again?
Do you Zoom your service?
Do we Zoom?
You Zoom the services.
We used to during lockdown. We Zoomed, and then we started to live stream our services. I do miss doing a service saying you need to unmute. I miss doing all that. But we live stream. It goes onto YouTube as well. So we're mainly live streaming now. Muswell Hill have done what is called hybrid, where they put physical and virtual together. So those who can't join us in person, like this is hybrid, isn't it?
Well, I would love the fact, I have this issue with sometimes, I don't know if you also have this, where you're walking down the street and you ring someone by mistake in your pocket, right? So I'd be walking down the street, picking my daughter up from school, and suddenly Matt Lunn would be preaching from my pocket. Because I'm subscribed to your YouTube channel. There you are.
That's
Methodist minister to be,
Yeah, that's how powerful I've become.
Irene, do you want to ask that question? Because I saw you wrote something, Irene.
Yes, I want to know how autonomous are your individual churches, or do you have to accept the authority of, for example, the Methodist Conference?
So how autonomous are the churches from conference? Whoa, what a question, Irene.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So, conference is always representatives, and with every area of the country has to have what is called synods, and Lunn districts go to conference. So really, we should always be sending people to conference who represent the people that you're working with. So for instance, I could go to conference and say, I've got a view on, I don't know, marriage and relationships. About my view, it's about me representing the people. So you've got conference, and then when conference then, if you like, rubber stamp it, it's down to fielding down. I think that helps with that way. So you've always got local church, district, and then you've got conference.
Wow, we had that members. Muswell Hill Synod of members.
So you've got church, local church, then you've got circuit, which is all the Methodist churches in the area of here, of the N8, N10. Then you've got the district, which is for us, London district, and then you've got conference. But the key word of all of it is connection. And all of that is meant to be on the top, represent connection, where we're meant to be connected to each other. So, and CPD, thank you so much. We have a wonderful book called CPD, and it's bedtime reading. And it sounds really boring, what I'm saying, but the idea is that we're all meant to be accountable to each other. So despite what we feel, our differences, whatever it is, we discuss it at conference. Big things that gets discussed, COP26, other bits, climate change, slavery, other local issues as well, like should a church in Melton Mowbray, should they have alcohol at the Methodist church? And that always gets turned down straight away. So how can we actually make those decisions? Some are very big decisions, some are quite small, but the idea is we're all meant to be connected together.
Thanks, Irene.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think we've come to an end. I think a nice end. Oh, we've got one more question.
If I may, it's mainly for David.
Yeah.
So,
I was wondering whether there was, yeah, exactly.
And I was getting a bit
It's simply so I can understand something, because I know very little about Jewish synagogues, but what I do know is what I see when I go down Golders Greenway, when I go down Stamford Hill. I see this most amazing people, huge fur hats on like that, and there are others with sort of ringlets and other things. I just wonder, what is the difference between those kinds of Jewish people and the kind that you represent, and more particular, what is your relationship with them?
Well, they probably think I'm the wrong type of Jew. Well, I thought that'd be funnier than it was, really.
It's always like them and no one laughs.
I know. I was like, so yes, so the similarity, so you know what you're talking about are communities that we would call Haredi, often outside ultra-Orthodox. Whenever you see an article in the Guardian about a Jewish community, you always see Haredi Jews. There's no Lubavitch. Yeah, so Haredi Jew is the top line. You never see any other type of Jews, and there's loads of other types. And that often annoyed me in my relationships with councillors. And actually, I'd say within the Labour Party as well, even though it's not a party political thing, that often there was a sense in the Jews that we relate to are the Jews that live in Tottenham and Stamford Hill, because they may have needs, right? And Labour Party loves a relationship where there's needs and supporting and welfare. And but there are Jewish people. I have 1,000 members, including children, in Muswell Synagogue. So there's similarities between me and myself and my family in the Haredi community is the authority of Jewish law. And there will be a difference between myself and the ultra-Orthodox community and the progressive and reform community, in that progressive and reform Jews will be less interested in the authority of Jewish law because of modernity. There might be an understanding that the Torah wasn't communicated by God, or rabbis are from then, 2,000 years ago, are not relevant now. I mean, we all have that in our religions, right? Where modernity clashes with tradition. And so if you were to ratchet up the volume of tradition and down modernity, that's the Haredi world, where there will be more of a stubborn insularity, lots of good life, lots of charity, lots of support, but what others might call a more, I suppose, fundamentalist relationship to
would you meet
text.
With them at all? Like
Yes. So I would, yes. So for instance, I know in South Tottenham, I share the multi-faith network. In that, we have representatives of the South Tottenham community, which is what you're talking about, because there's quite a significant ultra-Orthodox community there. And so I meet with them and we talk. There was a rabbi called Rabbi Abraham Pinter, who died of COVID, going around communities to tell them that they should be careful. He got COVID and he died. And he was an incredible guy in being from that community, but also relating to the political world, the civic sphere outside. Rabbi Herschel Gluck lives in Stamford Hill, has a Muslim Jewish forum. So there is existence of that. So yes, I would relate to that community. I know I could sit with members of the Orthodox community and learn the same texts. I learn it, they learn it. But there would be differences, clear differences on relationship to issues, women, sexuality, going to university, going to football, definitely, I suppose, there will be differences on that. But that's, Tony wants to come in there.
I was going to ask him, I think some equivalent questions I would like to ask him.
But just before, does that help at all?
Yeah, well, it's helping you to understand the difference.
Yeah, in some ways you've got that, after that you've got a spectrum that moves from, so within the ultra-Orthodox community, you've got by the way, there's a Lithuanian-based community. They don't speak anything like Lithuanian, but they come from communities that would have come from Lithuanian Talmudic academic learning, and I'm not university, but learnedness. And then there's the Hasidic community who wear the strimal, which is the fur hat, who are more, what's the word for it? There's a more of a sort of pure spirituality. They come from dynasties in Ukraine and Poland who wanted to blast through the idea that you had to learn to relate to God. You had to study to relate to God. You could just pray or be to relate to God. You could just say Hebrew letters, be ignorant and still be there with God. And they are different communities in Stamford. And Lubavitch is nothing like any of them. I don't know where to put them. They are Hasidic technically, but they actually have become a sort of modern outreach group, which does a lot of very strong outreach to Jewish communities. We don't quite know where to place Lubavitch with, but they're great. I mean, they're great. So do you want to ask it?
I was going to ask Matt, and this question would relate to it's so great to see the two of you together, and it's often the case, I think, sometimes with Judaism, that you get on better with non-Jews than other Jews. So I was wondering how that relates to Methodism, which obviously was founded, I don't know if the right word is, it was a schism, but it was, as you've already said, Raj. So what happens to how easy do you find it to relate to other Christian denominations, which is an enormous problem? You know, you see Christians with the black hats, you know, the Amish or whatever. And
Amish?
Is it in any sense easier for you to perhaps relate to that? Massively different Christian sect, or are they really all the same, or not?
Wow, I've got to really. I'm glad this isn't.
Your
this
fault,
is
by the
recorded. Yeah, this is recorded. You can always tell the difference between a Methodist and the other Christian. One, that Christians walk with the Bible, a Methodist walk with the hymn books, because we like a good song. There's people what is called what is evangelical. I'd like to think that I'm evangelical. I'm liberal, inclusive evangelical, and there's the conservative where actually if it's black and white, it's black and white. It is what it is. I find it quite easier to mix with people, you know, of other faiths and actually with church leaders. London's hard. And when Helen and I moved 4 years ago, I had the best time of my life before becoming a minister. Because the Sundays that I had, I got to go around the different churches that were not Methodists. Different places. So I went to one church that was quite local. And when I found out I was a Methodist minister, it didn't go quite as welcoming from their side as maybe it should have been. I went to a Salvation Army, and you pick up all the different kind of things of how there's certainly lots of different traditions in there, and all goes back to the Reformation, all the way from the Catholics and the Church of England, others of Methodist Church. The Salvation Army was a branch from the Methodist Church. William Booth, the founder of Salvation Army, was a Methodist minister. It all seems to be that people pull away from their denomination when they forget what they were doing in the first place. And that's why William Booth pulled away from the Methodist Church, because maybe we got too back into our buildings too much. And William Booth founded the Salvation Army, of how the soup kitchens, and one point being called the Skeleton Army, because there were more people in the Salvation Army than there were in pubs. Imagine that. So there's answer to that. There's lots of different things, but I think for London, for church leaders, boy, it's hard. It's hard to mix with others. We've got to be competitive. Some church leaders are really, they get it. They get, I don't know if anyone watches Father Ted, but there's Father Jack.
We are at the moment.
Yeah, Father Jack would always say that's an ecumenical matter. And ecumenical is always, it's a tough thing. Some other places, areas do it better than others. I think in this area, not there yet.
It's an interesting question as to whether actually schism is avoidable or not. Does schism actually just have to happen? Or, you know, I'm thinking parallels in terms of, you know, the breakaway of reform and progressive Judaism, and why is avoidable or not? You know, it's really fascinating.
Yeah.
We've got more coffees to down, haven't we?
Before someone comes in,
Phil's going to
go on, Phil.
Well, it was just a quick one. You mentioned that being a Methodist, you always walk around with a hymn book there.
Yeah.
And you mentioned your favourite hymn before, which I didn't recognise the name of. So the question was, could you just tell us what that hymn was that was so great? And Rabbi,
Yeah.
as you grew up, not quite as religious as you are now, what was your favourite hymn when you were growing up?
I'm going to read
If you want to give us one of ours, that's fine.
You do yours first.
Oh,
I'll
my
find
favourite
this
hymn.
way.
Hymn
From my gosh,
before you.
that's a good
I'm
question.
googling the hymns, so you.
You're Googling?
Yeah.
What's your
Yeah.
favourite? What's your favourite then? If it's a donor alarm or maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
what is your favourite spiritual tune?
Yeah, because I used to go to assembly where we would also sing hymns at assembly. And so today, actually, being in the armistice service, hearing hymns being sung, which is fascinating, standing there with it being, the singing. Goes, what's the hymn? What's the top of the? What was your hymn?
Mine was for 1,000 tons. I don't know if that's my favourite. It's always that I like it. And the best one we did it was when I was preaching at St. Mark's a few weeks ago. It was the best, longest version of 1,000 tons I've ever had. It was joyous. It was great. But the verse that I liked, I was going to refer to, is verse 4. And it says, it's written by Charles Wesley. It's anything by Charles Wesley. It's spot on. He breaks the power of cancelled sin. He sets the prisoner free. His blood can make the foulest clean. His blood availed for me. And then it also then says, the humble poor believe. And it just, to me, just says everything that all are basically, all are welcome together. So that's one of my favourite. Charles Wesley also wrote Hark the Herald Angels Sing. It'll be coming up. Yeah, it'll be coming up next month.
Well, one of the things actually that I remember as a kid singing, and it's something that we love, it's a real crowd pleaser in synagogue on the Jewish New Year and on Yom Kippur, is what we call Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. And that's, there are many things I learned, songs that I would have learned as I grew into religion, or found out the tunes that were sung in English synagogues, which are different than what I was brought up with in Edinburgh even. But this one, at the end, when we say, Chonenu va'anenu, answer us and be gracious to us, Ki ein banu ma'asim, because we do not have any deeds. We're empty of deeds. We come from that position. And it's a really beautiful moment. I have a child with special needs in the panel, my second child. And it's one of those moments at the end of the fast, when you fasted all day, when he glows. He's fasting, he's now 16, and he just really gets into it. And the whole community, and it's actually quite emotional because we've not had that for 2 years, really, where we're all together, everyone's fasted together, petition God for forgiveness, and all sins that together. I remember as a kid doing that in my, synagogue. These are good connections back to our childhood.
Yeah.
Song is so important.
It is, but there are some worship songs that drive me mad.
I think my members would say the same.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that sometimes we feel like God's just so distant that we want God to come and do something. Or some words like, open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Great worship song, but what does that mean? Does my heart have eyes on? What does that mean? There's some lines of worship songs that you feel like dove from above, like shooting, it's like, come on, God, give me something, and that.
Well, we have a very, very esoteric poem in our prayer book, a psalm of glory, hymn of glory it's called, which is usually sung by children under the age of 13 or so. Like the children will sing it. They would have no idea what it means. It's like esoteric, mystical lines, but it's become the thing that you sing when you're a kid before you're bar mitzvah.
We do it in, well, you know more about it than me because you've won more of them, the FA Cup finals. We sing a bag with me every FA Cup final. I wouldn't know because we're not always there enough to know it. But,
I wouldn't be there either. It's on a Saturday.
Yeah. Last time we sung a bag with me at Wembley, my rugby league team got beat, Challenge Cup final.
No.
And I say, if you're going to get beat, you get beat in style. So we're in the Guinness Book of Records. Look up Hulkinston Rovers. Hulkinston Rovers 0, Leeds Rhinos 50. If you're going to get beat, you do it in style. That's what I say. And we sang a bag with me. There we go.
Reverend Matt Lunn.
Bless you, Rabbi David.
That was a lovely, lovely evening. Really, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope everyone online did, but I really did. I know we both did.
Yeah, it's always pressure when I always think when someone said about conference, and I'm thinking, oh, I don't know.
It's good not to know. It's
Yeah,
good
yeah,
not to
yeah,
know.
absolutely. I don't plan to be president of the Methodist conference.
Everyone. Thank you for all of you that came online. Go and have a drink, a nice pint or something as well.
It's on us.
On us.
Not here, not here, not here.
Oh, there you are, your G&T there. Thank you, Beth, for working with us to organise as well and publicise. Thank you for everyone for coming. It was really good, and you're welcome to stay, of course, a little bit as well. But really good.
We'll do it again, yeah, absolutely.
Now, once again, everyone, because what we could do is take a little selfie.